Hey there, I just wanted to share some thoughts about the new moon in Cancer that's taking place for most of the world on Tuesday, the 14th. But if you're in Hawaii, you've got the new moon on Monday, which reminds me of one of my favorite songs by Duran Duran. I wait for a new moon on Monday so that I can play the song all day long. Anyway, let's talk about the new moon in Cancer and what this might represent. If you're new to this channel, by the way, my name's Louisa. Welcome to Feel Good Astrology. So in this video, I'm going to be looking at the planetary picture for the new moon in Cancer. I'm also going to be looking at the Sabian symbol for the new moon in Cancer, and then finally talking about some of the asteroids are lining up in a square or a trine or an opposition to the new moon in Cancer, just so we start to unlock some of the deeper messages so that you can use this to your advantage. Now, I've been recording lots of other things at the same time. And one of the things that I've noticed since creating these slides is that I'm no longer thinking about the basket that every astrologer out there is talking about right now. Regarding Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that are all going to be at 4 degrees in their respective signs. I'm starting to think that this is more of a boat right now, and I might talk a little bit more about that, but it seems kind of fitting that we've got the new moon in Cancer, which is a water sign. So I may just change my terminology as we go through this. Anyway, let's get cracking. So we've got a new moon in Cancer. If you have in your birth chart an angle, i.e. the ascendant, the IC, the descendant, the MC, the midheaven, or your sun or moon around, say, 15 to 25 degrees in the sign of Cancer, which is this lovely symbol here, then this new moon will be really felt. It could feel like a release. It could feel like an emotional release. You might find that you've got planets. For instance, this is right on my Saturn right now. I'm already starting to feel this come in. But new moons are usually here to show us where we're ready for a new start, to really clean the slate and really make a conscious decision to start something, to start something fresh from a new perspective. And it gives us a lot of energy to grow something. As with all changes, I think like maybe a page card in the tarot, it's reminding us that these are new beginnings. They're very, very gentle. And in the sign of Cancer, these new beginnings are absolutely gentle because they're in a water sign. It's a lot more tender than usual. Now, this new moon is also in a conjunction to Mercury retrograde. Now, I think Mercury retrograde has been helping us to understand what energies are surrounding us right now. Like, what energies are we swimming around in? Mercury retrograde, he hasn't been in water for a really long time. In fact, all the retrogrades of this year are in water signs. We're now in a kind of Mercury retrograde water track. What this is meaning is, for a lot of us, we're going through an emotional revolution. In this year and the next year, we'll be feeling a lot more into our emotions and understanding where our past emotions have really led to where we are now. And so I always think with retrogrades, we're looking at renovation, reimagination, revisiting, revising. We are getting the chance to review things at a deep level. And so Mercury has been working through our Cancer feelings, which could absolutely relate to our home, our childhoods, our relationships with mothers in particular, our relationship as a parent, and everything to do with our emotional security. Cancer is a very, very much a sign that loves emotional security and absolutely guards it. I don't want to say possessively, but really ensures that nothing comes and messes with the emotional stability. So this is a very powerful new moon, and it's also happening in a very powerful week ahead. By the way, if you want to know more about the week ahead, please check out that video that's also released today, because these are really going hand in hand. Now, with this new moon, we've also got a square to Saturn. Now, Saturn, I quite like astrology and how it relates to transactional analysis. There's a really great astrology book that I've had for, well over 20 years, and it's called Astrology and the Games That People Play by Spencer Grendal. And he likens the positioning of Saturn, the Sun, and the Moon as your child, your adult, and your parental archetypes. You know, it's assuming that we all have a side of us that is authoritative and parental, and that we have a side, that's Saturn, by the way, that there's a side of us that's also very adult and assertive, that's our Sun, and there's a side of us that is tender and childlike, and that's our Moon. With what Spencer shares, he's likening this to transactional analysis. And to me, this is showing that our child and our adult self are very much in sync at the moment. So to me, this is talking about personal agency and the need to ensure our inner child is satisfied, ensure all our needs are met, and to do it with some assertion. However, it's also showing that there's a judgmental adult in our presence. Most likely it's an adult we hear in our mind's eye or hear in our little inner ears, you know, where sometimes you might hear yourself say, oh, I can't believe I did that. And you actually then realize it was the voice of your parent all along. And so I guess what I'm saying here is this particular new moon, it's really tender. I've already mentioned that, but it's even more tender because there's an element of self-control, self-judgment, self-punishment, or we might in actual fact be feeling the pressure of somebody real close by that seems to be judgmental. So it's important to recognize, you know, are we creating our own pressure, or are we allowing the voices in our head or actual real people to put more pressure on us? Because one of the things with these kinds of squares is they can leave us really despondent, and they can really leave us feeling cold in ourselves, you know, almost like we have to cut off from our emotions and deny what we're feeling just for it to make sense or just for it to stop. So I think we have a choice with this new moon. You know, are we going to are we going to hold ourselves and protect ourselves? You know, Cancer is a very, very protective sign. Now, one thing that I would always say is, rather than going one way or another, see how you can integrate this. So how can you hear what appears to be judgment whilst not taking it personally? And that would be the optimum. And that's a really sort of adult position to take. And I think, you know, the Sun here in the sign of Cancer really helps us to make a strong, emotional, new decision. If you also think about it, we've still got Mars and Uranus real close by to each other, really helping us to make a new conscious decision to take action about something. So there's a lot of things showing us that we're about to emerge with a new set point. So I like that. Now, we've also got a square to Chiron coming in. It's not quite that. It's not quite there. If you're wondering what these S's and A's are, by the way, this means that the new moon is separating from Mercury retrograde. It's already past it. It's already past the square, but it's still playing in. But we're coming into the square with Chiron. It's applying into the square with Chiron. Now, the application of this square to Chiron is also showing that we might need to be taking a decision where it feels like we're having to be quite mature. I see Chiron as well, he's known as the wounded healer, but I also see him as a really good mentor. You know, when we get the handle of our pain, we become our own mentor. We become somebody who can listen patiently, maybe a counselor, maybe, I don't want to say therapist necessarily, but, you know, we become what we've needed all along. And so this isn't necessarily something that we find easy, but it's a challenge, you know, to be able to get into this new emotional journey. We need to be able to coach ourselves. We need to be able to stand for ourselves, even when we forget who we are or we forget what we're doing, you know. So this is really asking us to come into a lot of maturity to be able to facilitate what the new moon is wanting to create. So I love that. Now, we've also got two semi-squares, one to Venus and one to Uranus. In fact, at the time of this new moon, we've got Venus and Uranus in a square to each other. They went into a square just the day before. So Venus and Uranus in a square together is bringing in this energy of restlessness about our values. You know, it's encouraging us to see our values from a completely new perspective. So I think, you know, perspective about our relationships, our attachment to things, and maybe we're ready to let go of some stuff. Maybe we're ready to let go of some baggage. You know, there might be things that we've held on to for years that have felt like, oh, this is really me. This is really my energy. And, you know, right now we might just want to clear those associations. So I do see that there's a lot of that coming in, and it can feel quite frustrating being balanced in between this. And of course, the new moon is at the midpoint of Venus and Uranus. So yes, there's some restlessness with this new moon as well. Other things, not necessarily new moon related, but what else is going on? Like I mentioned, we've got the conjunction between Mars and Uranus, bringing in a fresh sense of perspective and almost this strong need to make a decision about something. It feels like we are cutting away from something and saying, enough of that. That's not serving me anymore. This has to go. We've got the basket, although if you see my latest release, you'll know that I now think of it as a boat. I think we need to turn it upside down. What really occurs to me with this is that the line between Pluto and Jupiter, this opposition, is really showing us a horizon. It's a horizon line. Like half of our chart is the container for these energies, and then the other half is really, really free. Now, given that I'm now seeing it as a horizon line, and that Pluto is about the underworld, like he's the god of the underworld, and Jupiter is the god of the skies and the and he's all there about thought and the greater context of things. Jupiter's a great thinker. To me, this is showing us that all of our unconscious patterns have already come in. We've experienced lots of patterns so far. I talk about this in the other video, by the way, but Jupiter now is leading us out of this. And as he leads us out of this, he's leading us into a whole new storyline. He's leading us into a whole new vision. So that's also an energetic that I think is underpinning this new moon in Cancer. And then finally, we've also got a trine between Venus and Chiron. So in the same way that I said, our attachments and our relationships and our values are being changed a little bit, and you know, we might be restless about them because of this square between Venus and Uranus. This is also creating a lot of healing for us. And so what I really see is we're disconnecting things which aren't us, and we're connecting to the things that values and relationships and possessions and attitudes towards money that are healing. So it's like disassociate from what's taking us down, connecting with what is really working. And with Venus and Chiron both in earth signs, in the early degrees of earth signs in particular, I mean, I love Taurus because it's so fertile, isn't it? You know, it's so lush. When I think of Taurus, I think of bulls languishing in grassy fields underneath beautiful oak trees. You know, that really epitomizes to me the Taurus energy. You know, the all the senses are feasting, you know, so there's health and well-being when we're in our physical bodies, grounded in our bodies and enjoying being where we are. And then there's Venus in Virgo. She's alerting us to how we can look after ourselves in new ways. She's wanting us to be really practical with that. So I really see that there's this really strong need for a practical reality that feels absolutely nourishing as well as healing. And again, that needs to fit into our definition of this new moon. So that's the underlying picture as I see it. Let's now have a look at the Sabian symbol for this particular degree. Now, I really love Linda Hill's Sabian symbols. And so I always go to her website. I recommend you buy her book. It's really good and it goes deeper onto each of these symbols. It's really worth taking some time actually and having a look at the symbol for your sun, your ascendant, or maybe like where your progressed moon is right now. It can be very helpful for helping you to get inspiration with a problem. So anyway, the new moon in Cancer, it's at 21 degrees 59. As ever, I looked at 21 degrees and it will automatically get rounded up with Linda's website to Cancer 22. Now, this is a young person awaiting a sailboat. This symbol shows someone who feels there's a strong sense that the ideal will come if we wait just long enough. The waiting can lead to a pleasurable expectation, but it's important not to become dependent on unreliable expectations. If you're constantly looking out, then you're not giving enough time to looking back or inward at the things you already possess or have already access to. How long are you prepared to wait on the dock for your ship to come in? That's so funny. That I'm now talking about boats. Has it already come in, but you've not even noticed? Are you waiting in the right places? Waiting for something to arrive? Escapist fantasies that waste time. Travel and longing for escape. Nervous anticipation. Expectancy. Time and tides. Boats. Safe harbors. So and just at the bottom, Linda always puts in a kind of warning of what happens, if it's getting a little bit distorted. So longing for fulfillment that may never come. That's important to make sure you're not like waiting for that one special day where it's all going to happen. And, missing opportunities that are right here, right now for you because of your emotional inaction and also rocking someone else's boat. So what I really get here is it's not a time to wait anymore. It's a time to consciously make a decision. And also to really look around and notice what you've already got. And you can do both. You don't have to do one or the other. So I think that's quite a helpful thing to understand, because, one of the things with, these astrological and planetary alignments is there's always this idea, oh, look, this is coming in, this is going to change things. And oh, look, here's an even bigger aspect coming in. This is really going to change things. This is really going to get things going. And, I'm a sun sign Sagittarius, and, we're known for looking into the future and just being stuck in the future. But I really think this new moon in Cancer is asking us to be really present and a little bit inward looking, as is Mercury retrograde. It's saying, have a look around. Seriously, look at what your emotions are saying to you. Notice your reactions to things. They'll be telling you everything that you need to know. You already have the answers within you. And, with Mars and Uranus in a conjunction, it's asking you to take action. It's not asking you to wait longer. And Venus in a square to Uranus is asking you to take action as well. So, and it doesn't have to be a drastic action. Maybe over the next couple of weeks, you might just make one small decision every single day. In that way, you're not going to feel like it's a big emotional decision and it's shit or bust. What I really think is probably a wise thing is to do it really safely, given that the sign of Cancer absolutely values emotional security. It's important to make these small incremental changes so you don't freak yourself out. So I don't know if that's resonating right now for you. I know it's resonating for me. So let's have a look at the last point, which is the asteroids and other stuff that might be playing into this. So I always use serenu.com, SERENNU.com, and I put in the time, place, and date for the new moon. But you can do this for your own birth chart. So you can put in your time, place, and date of birth into Serenu. And I think there's up to 1,000 asteroids that you can get, like you can find the position for. It's quite helpful because a lot of these named asteroids listed on serenu.com are asteroids or trans-Neptunian objects or uranium points, but a lot of them have a strong mythology behind them and you can easily research them. So anyway, let's talk about these ones. So first of all, we've got Icarus, which is in a conjunction with the sun and the moon. We've also got Nessus making a trine to the new moon. We've also got Narcissus making a trine to the new moon. And then we've got a T-square formed with Dejanira and also with Pallas Athena. So I'm going to run through these. I think I'm going to work with them according to how important they are. So I'm going to start with Icarus because it's in a conjunction with the new moon. Icarus was imprisoned with his dad, and his dad was a famous inventor, and they wanted to escape. And there were old bits of feathers and old bits of wax in their prison. And so they made wings so that they could fly out of the tower that they were locked in and they could escape. Now, his dad said, Icarus, whatever you do, make your escape, but don't fly close to the sun because the sun is going to melt your wings. And he's like, I've got this, Dad. Flies out. Sure enough, his wings melt. He falls into the ocean and drowns. So to me, this is a story really saying that we need to be prudent and have humility and understand timing and perspective. It's all very well having bold ideas and aspirations, but we also need to be down to earth. Literally, he came down to earth. And so to me, this is a message that around this new moon, it's important to maybe listen to any resistances that come up in your head. If you get a little instinct, when you're talking to yourself, I'm sure I'm not the only one that talks to myself. I hear this like almost constant commentary while I'm doing things. So this is it's important to listen to things. Like Icarus really should have listened to his dad and paid some attention to it. So, it's okay to have your fancy ideas and your big ideas, but please do listen to things. Don't go off half-cocked. And find yourself in mortal jeopardy. If we come to Pallas Athena is in a conjunction with Saturn. She's quite a way away from it, but she's an asteroid that shows where we have reason and intuition and skill for action. She's a warrior and she is a goddess. And she has strategy. She sees things in a really cool, calm way. So she can create effective solutions. She really knows what she's doing. She's really strong. And like strong in the mind. In fact, these two here, Saturn, that is already in a square with the sun and the moon, and Pallas Athena, they make quite the team. Pallas Athena, I would say already has quite a bit of discernment, but with Saturn, it's really also giving a lot of maturity as well. So to me, this is showing that we do have a really sensible head on our shoulders. This new moon is showing actually that humanity actually has all the answers they need right now. If we're waiting for more things to be revealed to us, the big question might be why? Don't you already know things? Can't you already see signs around you of what's going on? And so to me, this is indicating that there's some real strong skill that you can find and access. It might not be easy because it's in a square, but it's there to challenge you. Whatever decisions you're making right now to feel more emotionally secure, it might take some hard work, but you can be very skillful in doing so. Now, at the other side of this, we've got Dejanira, and she doesn't really make sense unless we look at Nessus at the same time. So I'm going to come to Narcissus first. Narcissus is basically he spurned a goddess, and she got very upset. He didn't really notice her because he was admiring himself. And so he was cursed to fall in love with the first thing that he saw, which was his own reflection. And so he wasted away gazing at himself like a big, lovesick teen. And it's a really sad story, actually, because it's really showing us that when we become self-absorbed, especially self-absorbed with our identity, we miss out on so much. We miss out on real love, true love, and connection. And so, one of the things that we need to watch out for with this new moon is, sure, we need to be on a journey of self-protection and a new emotional decision that we're making. And I think it's meant to lift us up so that we love ourselves, but it's also important that we make sure that we're not going like the wrong way here. Now I'm going to come to the last two. So we got Nessus. Now, Nessus was a cruel character, and he really carried revenge in his heart. And so he was a centaur, and he wanted to have it off with Dejanira, who already had a partner. And I think it was Hercules or Heracles. They might even be the same characters. I don't know. But anyway, so he tried to rape her and he attacked her, but she managed to get away. And whilst that was happening, he got attacked by her better half. And basically he was attacked with an arrow that had been dipped in the Hydra's poison. And so Nessus lay on the ground and he was dying. And as he was dying, he said to Dejanira, listen, if your husband cheats on you and you want to know, just put some clothing in my blood. And if he's lying to you, you'll see it. That he sold this story to Dejanira. He said, you can be certain in your love with your husband by using my blood. Now, he already knew that his blood had been infected with the Hydra's poison. So he was tricking Dejanira. Years later, she thought her husband had a glad eye for somebody else. And so she took this piece of material that she'd soaked in Hydra's blood, and she somehow wrapped it around her husband, who immediately started to die, and he was in immense pain. And so Nessus, not only did he die because of his own brutality and his unresolved desires, and his need to be like dominating things, but he also was able to get revenge even when he wasn't there. He sowed the seeds of revenge. So Nessus, when he shows up, he's quite a nasty character, very, very toxic, really betraying people. And then Dejanira, she is utterly vulnerable, and she's really known as an asteroid to do with victimhood, absolutely. She learns about this, but she's having to transform her vulnerability into healthy strength and to create boundaries. So her lesson is, how can I know myself, have boundaries so I don't get so that I stay strong and don't look weak, like I can be attacked. That's not to say that you are weak if you get attacked, by the way. I'm just talking about this mythology. She is an image in our charts of where we feel like a victim, and actually where we might be a victim of somebody's betrayal and somebody's revenge and somebody's nastiness. And so she's an interesting one to put into your chart. If ever you have a situation like that, it's worth putting her in and seeing where she is. It can often give us clues. So how do we all tie this back to the new moon? Well, first of all, I would say, with this new moon, it feels like we're under a little bit of pressure. First of all, to come out of victimhood, but also to avoid going into judgment. So I'm sure most of us have got a victim story somewhere in our repertoire, and I'm pretty sure we've all got a judgmental person in our brain as well. And so, the new moon is actually at the midpoint of our victimhood and also our judgmental parents, or that feeling of almost being small against authority. And so I think this new moon is quite dynamic because it's giving us the strength to lift ourselves out of our stories and our judgments about ourselves. So it's quite big. And then with Icarus next to it, it's also like a little message to say, you can lift yourself out And it's good to be strategic about it. You know, Pallas Athena is going to help you move out of this. She'll help you to see things calmly and kindly. You know, she's, you know, she is calm in her ways of working things out. So we can lift ourselves out of this victimhood, but it's also reminding us to still stay humble. And it's also warning us actually that if we're not humble, we might take a tumble, you know, we might like fall to the ground. And then this lovely trine here, though it's including Nessus, to me, this is talking about how self-love needs to come in, healthy self-love, and how we can connect to a healthy self-love, whereby we don't become so into our new start that we become really self-absorbed. And it's also talking about that part of us is maybe needy for connection and needy to have things our own way. And so it might be connecting us to our childlike selves. I'm not suggesting that any of us would betray or brutalize another person in our childlike self. But when we think, you know, when I think about Nessus, you know, if I was to imagine his mythology and what made him like that, I would say there's a little boy there who didn't get his needs met and threw a massive tantrum and didn't learn to express his anger, didn't learn that life could be okay, that we could come into consensus, that we could work things out. You know, I imagine there's a part of every one of us that is not going to do the things that Nessus did, fingers crossed. But I do think there's a side of us that has all thrown a tantrum and really wanted things our own way, so much so that we might have cried and screamed and shouted. I'm sure we can all relate to that at some level. And so, you know, I think this new moon is here to allow us to see that having needs is okay, but how can we release the needs that we can now see as from our adult perspective? Okay, that need was maybe a bit over the top. Maybe, you know, from my adult perspective, I can see things differently. I think Nessus is here to help us go real deep and see like the parts of us from our childhood that maybe we don't want to see. And so I think both of these characters are here to help us come into a healthier version of self-love with ourselves. So when I look at this T-square and also this grand trine, really what I'm seeing is self-love, and a new sense of emotional stability. And quite frankly, this is saying to me that the emotional stability, as ever, starts with us. It's not something that is given or granted from somebody else. It's not something outside of us. It's an inner job. It really is inner work. So I don't know if that was helpful for you. I hope it was. Remember, it's also saying, you know, how long are you going to wait for? You know, what are you waiting for already? You know, this is encouraging you to make a decision about your emotional security. So yeah, I really hope that was helpful. If you would like some help to unpack things that are going on in your life, and if this is a good time for you, then just feel free to book into my diary on Calendly. You can see that below. Or if you would like more support with the new moon, I do new moon and full moon hangouts to my free community on the School platform. If you go to www.school, that's skool.com/feelgoodastrology, you can join the freemium. So it's completely free. There are extra forecasts, moon forecasts, 5 days a week, already giving guidance. We have a timeline where people are talking and sharing some stuff. And there's some extra courses and things, lots of different things that you can learn and share. If that sounds like something that would be supportive for you and helpful or fun, then just consider joining. So anyway, there's lots of different ways that we can be supported during this new moon in Cancer. Wishing you a beautiful new moon in Cancer experience and also an exciting week ahead. And if you do want to know more about why I think this is all a big boat, then check out my latest release, which you can see coming up straight after. Lots and lots of love to you. Bye for now.